All right, everybody, welcome back. Sorry for the slight delay in posting tonight's lecture. This week, another kind of quick one overall for lecture, but this is a really important one. And this goes back to when I first started applying for jobs, because I realized that's hopefully what everybody's goal is in this class is to get a job, hopefully in our field. So, whether that be in academia, industry, or something in between, all the skills that we're going to go over today are going to be important for that. The first one that we're going to be talking about is CVs, and then we're going to get into three different, kind of like three and a half kind of different social media that are geared towards scientists and researchers overall. And, you know, we'll do LinkedIn, which is a little bit more industry. We'll do Google Scholar, which is more about your publications. And then we'll do something that's kind of in the middle, which is ResearchGate, which came out while I was doing my PhD. All three of these have been beneficial for me in my career, and we'll talk about how those all apply. In order to do any of the social medias, what you're going to need is a really good headshot. And I'm bummed that we haven't been able to do the professional headshots because I know that was really successful in years past when we've done this class. But what we'll do this year is you'll see that I've posted a YouTube video that's by someone else, by a professional, not myself. I thought about making a how-to video myself, but realized there are better photographers out there who have a better idea of how to do that. So I posted the video from a professional business kind of manager and photographer on how to take your own kind of headshot selfie. But spoiler alert, you're not going to be holding your phone out in front of you like this, doing a selfie like that. There'll be a little bit more set up to it. So we'll get into that when we get to the assignments at the end. But also know, so you'll want to watch that video, and there'll be two more videos posted tomorrow. One will be of me following those directions and taking, kind of a at-home selfie myself. And then the other one will be an interview that I'm going to be posting tomorrow with my postdoc mentor. He's been pretty savvy over his career with using social media and things like LinkedIn and Google Scholar specifically, not so much ResearchGate, but those first two to really advance his career. So I want to talk with a scientist out there who's at the professor level at a an R1 institution and talk about what you need to be involved with and what you kind of can ignore from somebody who's a little bit further along in their career to let you know, okay, this is an important thing that I might want to just have might dip my toes in the water a little bit with. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to start with the CV. The reason that I'm doing this one is because I remember back when I applied for my first job, along with University of Wyoming and a couple other jobs, I didn't have a CV. I had a very, very basic CV that was my resume that had been, kind of used over and over and over again from undergrad up through kind of grad school. I never had really a need to make a CV, which is a curriculum vitae, which basically says everything you've done in your entire career, which is very different than most other jobs. And what this is going to be is kind of a track record for you, because if you decide to go into academia, having a skeleton of this at this stage in your career, whether you're a first-year master's student, second-year master's student, even a beginning-level PhD student, this is something that's going to be beneficial for you to have so that when those job opportunities come up, you already have something and, you just have to update it. And if you keep this as kind of a living, breathing document, saved on your hard drive somewhere, and if you update it when different milestones happen, it just becomes a lot easier to deal with when you actually do need it. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. And what I've done, I want you all to make your own CV if you don't already. I have uploaded the Word document of my CV. You are perfectly welcome to use the template that I have here and just kind of plug and play with your own information. But if you already have one in a format that you like better, go for it. As long as it's clean looking and very clear, there's going to be no problem with that. But I just thought that for some people it might be helpful to have a little bit of a template already going. You do not have to start this from scratch. If you've been fortunate enough to already start on your CV, you're ahead of the game, and you can use that to submit for this. But hopefully, you'll get a couple tips from what we're going over today, and you can update it a little bit more. Okay, so let's start We talked about how format's important. It's got to be pretty clear. Name and addresses at the beginning. I like to have this little section right here, which is research interest. It just talks about a little bit about what I do. I'm going to talk about what grad students should do a little bit later in a section that we're calling skills. You'll obviously put your schooling in. One thing that's different about my CV that will be different from yours, for your CV, especially for your master's or PhD, the GPA question comes in. Do we need to add GPA? Do we not need to have GPA? I would only include it if it's impressive. If you got a 3.8 or above, put it in there. If not, doesn't really matter that it's not in there. If you're able to do the research for most of our skills, it doesn't matter what your GPA is. If you're really good at doing assays, but you got a 3.4, 3.2, it's way better that you have the lab skills and are able to perform in class and lab than if you got a 3.9 or whatever that is. So I would say only include it if it's 3.8 or above to show that off a little bit. Another thing you might want to do is put the topic of your thesis or dissertation in there. Also, you may want to put your mentor in there. I've seen that as well. That's up to you. You can also put your expected graduation date. That's really important especially when you get to the PhD level. If you're applying for jobs and you haven't necessarily graduated yet, you put the expected date in there. You can also put things like ABD, all but dissertation. Even for masters, you can put ABT, all but thesis. And basically what that tells the people that are going to be employing you is you've handled all of your other responsibilities. The only thing you have left to do is defend your thesis and you'll be good to go. Okay, moving on. So that gets into the education a little bit. Moving on to professional experience. This one right now, with all the dates and everything that you're going to be listing in your CV, my recommendation is to start with the most recent and then move to the longest ago that you want to state in here. Now, this can get a little bit confusing because NIH, when they have you fill out the biosketch, they have you flip-flop that for the biosketch and have you do the oldest stuff first and some of the newest stuff at the end. I don't think that makes sense. If you're thinking about a person reviewing this and looking over what you've done in your career, they want to know what you've done recently, and then they'll go back in time from there. Okay, so you're going to have all the jobs that you've had, whether that's GA, TA, anything like that. The big thing that I would recommend here, the mistake that I see a lot of times with the kind of jobs, is people not editing them enough. You'll see on here, I have some of my jobs back when I was in graduate school. I was a personal trainer while I was in graduate school, and even as an intern doing cardiac rehab when I was at GW back during my undergrad. But I have taken out when I worked at a sandwich shop one summer after I graduated. That is not a job, although I was really good at making sandwiches and made some killer tips. That's not anything that's important to any career that I'm going to be applying for. So what I would recommend is definitely removing any job, especially any jobs that were in high school that are not relevant to what you want to do with your career. It should be in the scientific field overall. Okay, so make sure you edit those down. If that means you only have 2 or 3 jobs listed on there, that is way better than having some random job on there that's not applicable. Now, if the job's kind of borderline, like the personal trainer that I have in there, or the cardiac rehab that I don't really necessarily do cardiac rehab work anymore, but it is in the medical field. For example, if you are a person who might work for elder care. Now, that's not necessarily going to be the field that you're trying to go into, especially if you're going to do a PhD. However, it's in the medical field, so that might be something that you want to keep in there. So just use your best judgment with that, but don't put the, working at the clothing store or the restaurant or anything like that. Those are not really going to help out. Okay. Now we move on to awards and honors. You can see my first one came. I have one in undergrad down here, and then I didn't have another award until I was at the very end of my doctoral work. So if you're in kind of that gap right now and don't have that many, you can eliminate this. If you got a bunch, throw them in there. Okay, you can also put things like nominee, any of those sorts of things. I have the word finalist in here because I was a finalist for an award. You can definitely put that in there as well. Now we're moving on to any CV is going to have 3 main sections. And for a master's student, you're basically going to be covering mostly 2 of the 3 of those. And those are research, teaching, and service. Coming from a research lab, you want to start with kind of what your aim is. Do you want to go into doing research? Then you want to start with research. Okay, we'll get into service and teaching a little bit further on. But as far as research is concerned, the first thing people want to know about is grants. Can you get the funding necessary to do science in general? Now, I've been fortunate enough in the 5 years that I've been at Wyoming now to get some grants with myself as the PI. What I'm assuming that most people are going to be more towards this range right here. And you can see these are grant-funded projects that I worked on when I was a doctoral student. Now, what I do is for any of these, let's take this one, for example, let's do this one right here, number 15, okay, because this was one of the, number 14 in 2010. My PhD advisor, Professor Larry Armstrong, was the PI on that. I worked primarily on this. I was the lead doctoral student on this project. It was a really, really big study. Did I bring in this money? Absolutely not. But I want to let people know what I did. Here's another example in number 15 here. Dr. Armstrong was once again the PI on that. I was a supporting doctoral student in this one. My good friend, Dr. Colleen Munoz, is the University of Hartford, was the lead doctoral student on that, and I just helped. And I made sure to be really explicit in that. Is anybody going to read this and think, oh my gosh, Dr. Johnson has gotten 16 giant grants. He must have a couple $1,000,000. No, they're going to read this and look and say, oh, Larry Armstrong was the PI and Evan Johnson was a master's student working on that. I'm not going to attribute this to him. However, what they're going to say is, oh, hey, he's done some work in thermoregulation. He's done some work in water intake and even done some work in beef jerky as a recovery food. Okay, so those are just the things that you want to have on there. So if you're working on a grant-funded project currently, go ahead, put that in there. What that does is it lets anybody reading it, hey, this person has been involved in data collection that's related to this topic. Okay, that's all you're doing there because there might not be any publications from it, presentations that are coming out of it yet. So you want to make sure you get credit, especially at this early stage in your career, for topics that you've been involved with. Okay, the other thing that you want to do with your grant funding is separate it into kind of 3 sections. First section, obviously, successful grants that have been funded. So grants that have been, received money, received funding, and you've been able to complete the data collection on that. The second section, and as you proceed further in your career, this list is going to grow. In-process grants and funding. These are grants that you have written that are submitted that you just don't know about yet. Okay, and at any time during your career, especially when you move into academia and a tenure track position, you're always going to have 1 or 2 grants that are kind of pending, unless you end up getting one of those R01s for 5 years of a couple $1,000,000. Then you can sit back and relax for a couple years and not write a grant. Okay, and then the last one that I think is really, really important in the master's degree stage is unsuccessful grants, because we know, and anybody who's going to employ you knows that grant writing is hard, and getting a grant funded is also really hard. However, if you want to get credit for that. If you work hard to write a grant, for example, Dr. Schmidt and I have written 2 different grants here looking for some funding for some extension of Josh Losky's work right now, looking at our peripheral blood mononuclear cells. Neither of them have been funded. Okay, that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. But we want to also make sure that we put it in there that we have tried to get this funding. That's going to be really important, especially if you're a master's student wanting to go on for a PhD. If your potential PhD mentor sees, hey, this person has actually been a person who's written a grant, that's going to put you, give you a big leg up over some of the other master students that may be applying, because just breaking into writing that grant in the first place is a huge hurdle that a lot of people have trouble getting over. So put your unsuccessful grants in there as well. It tells them what the topics you're trying to get funded are, who you're trying to get funded through, and that gives them a good amount of hint about kind of what your abilities will be. Okay, so we have a bunch of those. Section 1 of our research section was our grants, okay? Section number 2 is publications. The first thing you'll notice that I've put up here is my Google Scholar metrics. And depending on who you're talking to, this is either really important or I don't care, okay? And it also differs from fields. Some fields that are very narrow have very small amounts of citations. What these will tell you, and we're going to get into, making your own Google Scholar account a little bit later, how many times a paper that you are an author on has been cited. And you can see that in general, since since I started writing papers, I've had 1,000 people cite my work. And then since 2014, 845 of those citations have occurred. The next is your H index right here. And basically what that tells you is that I have 19 papers that have at least 19 citations. You go look at Frank Hu from the Harvard School of Epidemiology, who writes all these nutrition papers. He was just involved in one of those big red meat meta-analyses of if it's good for you or bad for you. I think his H index is something like, 600. So he has like 600 papers with 600 citations. Yeah, I got a long way to go. The last one is the I-10, and that's how many papers you have with 10 or more citations overall. Okay, so that just gives your audience, and you can, this CV that I'm sharing with you guys was crafted for my tenure and promotion, so I'm trying to show off a little bit. I want them to see, hey, okay, people are actually citing his work. He's not just throwing it out into the ether and, it's just landing where it is. Next one, right here. This is an important one that you can start now, especially if you've been published on PubMed. Okay, this is a link that's going to be really, really helpful for you. And what this is this is a list of my publications right here. And we're going to take a little break from this and go over to how that works. So if you've used PubMed before, here is PubMed right here, okay? And if we want to go to my NCBI, if you have not made a specific login for NCBI, I would really, really recommend it because it has a lot of really cool features. First of all, you can do this over here, which is saved searches. And what that'll do is it'll send you articles that have any keywords in it. So it'll give you alerts like once a week. You can set when it sends it to you, which is pretty cool, especially if you're looking for a lot of literature on a certain topic. You can have them send you everything. So you can see I have everything that has glucose tolerance and exercise. That was related to my dissertation project, heart rate and RPE, and also heat and glucose or insulin. So different topics in there that can get brought to you. Okay, but what I want to talk about is this My Bibliography section over here. So if I click on this link right here, this gives my bibliography overall from newest to oldest. But I'm noticing in here, not all of my publications are in here. So what would I do if I wanted to add some publications? And you can see all your publications are in here, which is pretty nice because then you can just click on those and it takes you right to the PubMed page for that article. So if you're trying to share your work with other people, it's really cool. And you might only have 1 or 2 publications right now. You might be working on your first one at the end of your master's thesis. But knowing that this exists is going to be really, really beneficial for you down the road. So as soon as you get that first pub, get into NCBI and PubMed and get it on there. Okay, so let's say I want to add one of mine. This one I noticed was not on there. Water intake, body water regulation, and health. So I'm going to just click on that right now. And if you go over to the send to arrow, this is also what you would use if you're going to use a reference manager software. I'm just going to send it to my bibliography right there. Add to bibliography. Hopefully, if I go back to my NCBI and go to my bibliography, and it said 51. Oh, there it is, right there. Okay, we've now added that citation to the list, which wasn't on there previously, and that's on there now. And so it's automatically updated. You don't have to copy and paste or anything like that. And once again, you can go right to the article right from there. And this is just a little blurb that I wrote at the beginning of a special article about water intake and health. Okay, so that shows you a little bit about PubMed. It's nice to have that link in your CV. I'm going to go back to the CV now. And okay, there we go. It's nice to have that link right in there because then instead of the person having to read through all of your publications that are here, they can just simply go to that little link and look at it through there. If they want to look up any of the papers, they can do it through that link. They don't have to type or cut and paste the title of your thing into PubMed. They can just go through that link and very easily click and navigate their way to any paper that they might want from your personal library. Okay, in your publications, only include that Google Scholar if it kind of helps your case. If your H index at the beginning of your career is a 1 or a 2, like mine was for like most of my graduate career, you're not putting that Google Scholar in there. But if you have a couple good papers that are really highly cited and you're ready to put that in there, especially towards the end of your PhD, you might want to think about putting that in there. Okay? This location in general for publications is peer-reviewed only. If you happen to be a person who writes for lay publications, maybe you've been asked to write a couple newspaper articles, maybe you've been asked to write a little blurb for a magazine, Runner's World, ACSM Health and Fitness Journal, something that's not necessarily peer-reviewed. There's a spot for that, but it's not here. This is for a very specific thing, peer-reviewed journal articles only. So hang on to all those other publications because those are beneficial. Keep those because if you're going to be looking for a job in academia, all the people also want to know, is this person capable of communicating with the public, the lay population? Okay? So let's move on. Here are the publications, and what you can see here is the format is up to you. You can kind of choose the format. I like to do authors first, and you can see that you want to bold your name. Okay, that'll let people know with a lot of ease. Okay, are you the lead author? Are you the corresponding author? Or are you just a middle author? On this one, I just was helping out with some of the interpretation of the data. This was Hillary Yoder's master's project that we kind of extended on past this. And this was published in the Annal of Nutrition and Metabolism. And you can see that we have that in italics right there, and we use the abbreviation because nobody really cares. We want to keep this a little bit short as well. The other thing I want to put in here is that this has just recently been accepted for publication. We don't have page numbers for this, but if I'm applying for a job, I want to get credit for papers that I've been accepted for publication, even if that journal has a backlog of a year before that's going to come out in print. I don't want to have to hold putting that on my CV until it comes out on print. No, you just simply put in your citation right there, accepted for publication. Another option here, this is something that I've started doing mainly because University of Wyoming requires it, is this little thing at the end. This paper right here is a data-based paper. There are different types of peer-reviewed types of journal articles. Data-based, I have one down here, number 4. This one was an invited review. That's different than a normal review because what that means is this journal specifically reached out to my good friend and colleague, Luke Pryor, who's at the University of Buffalo, and said, hey, Luke, we want to write a paper about pacing strategies. We see that you and Evan Johnson have written a paper on pacing before. Can you write a review article on that? And he said, sure. And so it's still peer-reviewed. We still had to go through a lot of edits on this because that's how it is with any paper. But what this does right here is it tells people, okay, this was an invited review. Separately from that, we have a paper that Dr. Schmidt wrote with a little bit of my help last year, which was a regular review, okay? This is the editors did not reach out to us and say, hey, write this paper. We said, hey, we got a good idea. Let's write a review article about this topic, and then submitted it to the journal. It happened to be for a special issue, but the editors of that journal did not reach out to us. So those are 3 kind of different types of articles. Some people like to add that information in there. It gives the person reading it a little bit more kind of a view of what you're doing, but it's nice to have in there. So you can see different publications. Let's see if I'm missing anything. Oh, one thing to notice. Let's move down. I think I have an example, not on this page, right here. Here's a nice example. Do not embellish the number. You're not going to get any benefit by having one more journal article on there. Here's an example of when I probably could have done that, and maybe most people would have not said anything, but somebody might have said, I don't know about that. The example here, this was an invited review, and this was from Wilderness and Environmental Medicine, which is kind of an applied journal overall, and they wanted to know some opinions about drinking to thirst during exercise, specifically when it's prolonged endurance exercise overall. The format of this was that they reached out to us, my PhD advisor, myself, and Mike Bergeron, who's one of my other good colleagues, and said, hey, can you guys write this paper? And we said, sure. And our side on this was that drinking to thirst was not adequate. Well, they also reached out to another group and said, hey, We know you guys like drinking to thirst and think it's good. Can you write a opinion piece or a kind of a research-based piece on why drinking to thirst is adequate? Well, after we did that, we also wrote a rebuttal to what their article was. So before this went into publication, we had the opportunity to read the other group's paper and say, we don't really agree with, point 2, point 4, and whatever, and these are the reasons why. If you look up in PubMed, each one of these has its own citation, okay? You could look these up separately and it would come up on that screen that I was just looking at. Could I have put this as 21 and this as 22? Yeah. But part of getting invited to do this review was also doing this rebuttal. Why would I do that? Why would I, take the chance of somebody calling me out and saying, hey, that's just a rebuttal? You never want to do that. You always want to think about, okay, what is the worst possible outcome of each choice? If I choose to keep it as a subscript underneath and not add it as another number, a person might say, oh, this person only has, 23 publications instead of 24. Well, that's not going to make much of a difference. But if you chose to put it as another number separately all by itself, a person could say, this is pretty shady. I don't know about this person. Okay. Another example that I have of that was a paper that I wrote back down here, which was a case report. I went to Current Sports and Medicine Reports, was about a triathlete who had a couple of heat strokes, and we published that. And somebody wrote a letter to the editor and said that my article was terrible, and here's all the reasons why you're a bad scientist. And I read that and I was like, freaking out. But then all the people who were co-authors with me on that paper said, yeah, this is normal. This is what happens when you're doing, good science, is that people want to say that it's not that good. So we had the opportunity once again to write a rebuttal to their letter to the editor. Same thing. I chose to put that as a subscript underneath that as opposed to a different number. Okay, so those are publications as you move through that. That does that. Aha. Publications, non-peer-reviewed journal articles, okay? So if you write for a journal that is not necessarily a peer-reviewed journal, you can also make this as publications. Another kind of subscript you could use is just media. I used to have that on my CV as well. What have been my media publications? I wrote an article for Triathlete Magazine way back during my postdoc, and that came out. And so I would put that in media. Obviously, a lot of people who are hiring people want them to be able to speak to the media, so having those publications. Hey, maybe you're a guest on a podcast sometime. Well, put the link in there so that the person reading your CV can go in there and listen to you sounding all smart on a podcast. Fantastic. It's not peer-reviewed, but you should get credit for it, okay? If you work on any book chapters, you can do that. As you move on in your career, your mentors are definitely going to ask you to do that because book chapters are what get pawned off to all the grad students and postdocs and assistant professors because they're really hard and boring to write, and you don't get any credit for them. But that's not to say you shouldn't do them because when you get your TMP reviewed, they look at that for sure. Okay, so we did grants, we did publications, and now we're moving on to presentations. Mine's a little bit different than what yours is going to look like. Now, early in your career, one thing that you want to do is any presentation that is given with work that you have been a part of. For example, your mentor goes and gives a presentation and some of your work is included in some of the data slides of that presentation. You will be given credit for being part of that. Now, you'll do the same exact thing that you did with your publications. You will not put yourself as first author. What I've done, because it's a little bit later in my career now that I'm moving into year 5, I have only put in presentations that I am the person actually standing behind the podium, okay? I've done that for the scientific podium presentations. I've also done that for posters. Same thing with posters, okay? I want to stop. I saw one thing. This is a really similar thing. Okay, so this is a talk about that heat stroke case study that I had, and this kind of got a lot of traction when I was in graduate school. People thought it was pretty cool. So believe it or not, 3 separate people. So I presented it at the ACSM annual meeting in Denver in 2011, okay? But then after that, some people from the University of Arkansas asked me to come and give that talk there. And then at Grand Rounds back at the University of Connecticut, one of the MDs there asked me to give that talk there as well. So I gave the same talk, or pretty much the same talk on 3 different occasions within about, a year and a half span. Did I mark that as 3 different podium presentations? No. All I did was say, okay, here's the topic of it, and I presented it at 3 different places. That's something to do as well. Once again, you want to make sure you get credit without over embellishing. Scientific presentations. I have a little note here to say that I've only listed the first author. I do have the others available upon request. Okay, so I keep another log of those. Everything that I'm, second, third, fourth author on a different poster. As you move into your career, you're going to have a lot of posters that you're associated with, especially if you're in a big lab and people's data is kind of overlapping, and one person is taking one part and one person is taking the other part. But there is some data that you guys share. Everybody's taking care of the animals, everybody's taking care of the participants that are in a study. You have a larger author list there overall. So at this stage in your career, make sure that you keep track of those. Okay, let's move on. Next section, after your posters are done, we move on to continuing education and faculty development. This is a little bit more specific to faculty, but if you're doing any sort of professional development, let's say you're taking an online class that's not associated with your graduate program, that's just for your interest. Maybe you're, you really like statistics and you're like, I want to learn how to do R. And you take an online course about how to use R. Well, that's not necessarily a certification that would be in a separate section overall. That's not a class you're taking right now, but it is some professional development that you want to get a little bit of credit for. So that would be the thing that you put in here. Also, especially for students who are in the University of Wyoming's graduate program, you're required to attend those ECTL lectures. Why not put the topics of those in here? That way it could be a great topic or a starter for a conversation if you're in an interview, if you put those topics in here. Okay, might as well get a little credit. Works in progress. This has 2 separate sections, okay? What are the studies that I have going on right now? And then also, what are the papers that I'm in the process of writing, okay? And you want to be, once again, a little bit more conservative on this side as well. Don't put a work in progress of a grant that you just started writing, okay? That's way too far off in the future. There's a chance that might not go through, and then 2 or 3 years down the line, somebody's going to ask you, hey, whatever happened with that thing? Okay, and you don't want to have to explain, oh, well, I never ended up submitting that grant. No, you want to make sure that this is actually in the stage, so you can see that with this one right here that I've collaborated with the University of Arkansas, we're talking about, okay, data collection is complete. We are analyzing the samples right now. And I need to update this CV. This was actually originally from last year. Right now we're writing the manuscript for this paper. So we've moved on, and I should update that to say, hey, we're moving on and writing that. This one right here is about to be submitted, but it hasn't been submitted yet, so we don't have it in our manuscripts and review and preparation. Right here, we have another one, acute kidney injury, same thing, sample analysis in progress. We are still analyzing that data, so that's where we are. We haven't started writing the paper yet. Same thing down here. Data collected, ongoing, completed 2019. This is another one that needs to get updated, and we are in the final stages of data analysis right here. So this one should be moving down into the manuscripts and review. This is a great place to put manuscripts that are currently in review. Personal preference for me, don't put manuscripts that are in review in your publications above. That's putting a little bit of the cart before the horse there, because we don't know if it's going to get rejected. If it's just under review, you don't know, that might get rejected, and that's not really the place to put it. If you put it in review and kind of tell people where it's at, that's a great place, because it tells people that you currently have stuff that is going to be hopefully published pretty soon. Okay. Let's move on. Advising is going to be a little bit different. For a faculty member, obviously you have all your graduate students and undergraduate and even some high school students that I've advised over the years that are associated with your lab, have done a project in your lab of some sense. But what you want to do is, this is mostly going to be undergraduate and maybe some high school supervision. Most graduate students in part of their career are going to kind of get a student pawned off on them. Okay, whether it be an undergrad or a high school student that you're doing most of the oversight for. Yes, they work with the PI of your lab. Absolutely, they're going to meet with them 2, 3, 4 times a semester. But this is a thing that if you're doing a lot of the day-to-day, maybe you're helping them write an abstract for a conference. Maybe you're helping them write a grant. You want to get credit for that because that's part of your mentoring practice. So put that person in there. This is one that you're definitely going to want to check with your PI on, though. Don't just put this in there and then send it to your PI and say, oh, yeah, I'm advising this person, because you want to make sure that they check off on the fact that, oh, yeah, you know what? You are really advising that person, because different people have preferences in how they like students to write that up as a graduate student. My preference is if you're a master's student or a PhD student in my lab and you're doing 95% of the oversight of a student, put that person on your list for sure. Put the topic of what they talked about and any presentation they may have given. Okay. Probably not going to have too many students in your advisement at this point who have awards, but if you do, move on to there. Okay. Here we are with teaching. With teaching for so we had our research first. Now we're into the teaching section. For any teaching, you want to put the courses that you have taught, where you've taught them. You may have taught a class outside of the university that you're associated with. Maybe you taught a class for an online university. That could be, you should receive credit for that as well. You don't necessarily have to put the credit hours, number of students. This is just required by the University of Wyoming for us. That's why I put it in there. The main thing you want to do is put in what your role in that class is. Were you a GA? Were you a TA? Or were you the instructor of record? Were you the person who is teaching that class on a day-to-day basis, fielding all the student questions? Put those things in there, but definitely all the topics. Same thing, you're not going to have any formal advising overall. Now, last we come to this service component, okay? At the university level, once you get a tenure track position, there's kind of 3 different levels. You have your departmental service, your college level service, and then your university, and then also community. Okay, you don't necessarily have to break it up that way, but for example, I know Mackenzie, you sit on the graduate faculty board for those meetings, and you're the graduate student representative. This would be a great place to put something like that. Are you on any other RSOs at the university? Maybe you're involved with PEK or something like that. This is a great place to put that sort of stuff, because that is service. That is something that's making your university a better place in general. So once again, you want to get credit for that. So you can see they have the different ones. Here's at college, and here's a division level. The last section that I have on here is kind of our professional and community service. This has, okay, what have I done with ACSM? Maybe you're a representative at those meetings. And then if you've reviewed for any journals, you want to put those journals that you've reviewed for down there. And then any sort of certifications you put at the very end. The last part that I don't have on mine that I'm going to tell you right now where to put on yours is all the way up, right under research. Under research and scholarship, the first section that I have on mine is successful grants and funding. For any graduate student, I would put a second section in here before this. Before successful grants and funding, I'd put lab/research skills. Okay? And what that does is that's a chance for you to advertise the different skills that you can do. If you can run PCR, if you can do a Western blot, if you're really good with instructing exercise classes that are part of research, if you can run heart rate monitors and collect perceived exertion data, if you're good at measuring somebody's body temperature when they're in the heat, if you can do sweat rate measurements, any of those sorts of things, maybe you are able to draw blood. Those are skills that you want to list here, especially as a master and PhD student who's going to be moving on to the next level. If you're looking for a postdoc, if you're looking for a PhD position, that advisor is going to want to see what you can do for their lab. And so you really want to emphasize that right here. Okay? So before that successful grant funding, everybody in your CV that you're going to make on your own and submit to me for some critical feedback, put that lab/research skills in there, and you can put all the different skills that you have that'll allow you to kind of advertise yourself for your next position. Okay, a little bit more than I wanted to cover. I know that was a little bit long on CVs, and I didn't, intend to take this much time, but it's all important stuff. So go ahead, get started, use the template that I've provided, start your living, breathing CV document. You in 5 years is really going to thank you for starting it now, rather than having to think back 5 years ago to, oh man, what was that paper that one undergrad did, and he presented at that weird conference. Maybe I'll email my old mentor and see if they still have the listing of that and the author list and what conference it was at. No, don't give yourself that headache right now. Make your PI happy in 5 years as well, and start keeping a list of all those immediately on your CV document. That's going to help you down the road, okay? So that's part one of the assignment that you're going to be turning in next Saturday. I'm going to move the deadline a little bit into the weekend. Might as well make it Sunday, next Sunday night. Part one is going to be creating your own CV. Once again, if you've already done it, you're ahead of the game. Okay, let's move on to part two of the assignment. Part two, LinkedIn. This one should be pretty quick. And this is where your headshot is going to come in. Here I was fortunate enough to get one taken by the university when I first started here overall. So I've used that headshot. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a video of me doing a more recent one that I do in my house. Okay, you're all going to do a headshot in your house. If you already have a headshot that you like and you prefer, I understand that, but I want you to go through the practice of taking one in your house, because who knows how long we're going to be quarantined for. If you grow out a big beard over the course of this quarantine, I want to make sure that headshot accurately represents you. So let's go through the practice of taking a good headshot in your house. This is to avoid the classic mistake of having it be, especially, early in your career, you got the wedding photo and you've cropped yourself out because that's like the one time in the past 2 years you've dressed up, and you got, you're with the groomsmen or the whole bridal party and you're trying to crop yourself out. That is not a good look for a professional site like this. One of the other interviews that I'm going to post tomorrow, once again, is with my postdoc mentor, and that's going to have, he's going to tell why LinkedIn is important for his career, how you can take like 10 minutes once a semester, update this, and just have it keep going. I did not think LinkedIn was important until I started working with industry. And one of the program managers who was, overseeing the money that I was getting as a researcher said, "Oh, we'll just find you on LinkedIn." I'm like, "I'm not on that. I don't use that. That's for business people. That's not for scientists." And she's like, "No, we use that every day." So if you're thinking about a potential career in industry, having a nice kind of, it doesn't have to be very, broad or have a lot of information on it overall, but just having a place that somebody can search for you and maybe get one little piece of contact information that they know is a little bit more verified, that's going to be helpful for potentially getting some job interviews. I've heard of people getting job interviews just from people searching their profile. That hasn't happened to me, but it's a possibility. You can't get that if you don't have it. So you want to put your title in there, a nice little background, something that's not too distracting overall. I just put like a nice kind of wood grain background on there. Then you're going to put a little section of about. Most people are going to read this about section, and that's pretty much it. So I have a little quote about Hippocrates, which kind of guides a lot of the research that I do. You can just put maybe some of your job skills in there or what you're looking to do in your career. There's a bunch of guides online for kind of what's the best thing to put. You only have 200 words, so keep it short and sweet. Nobody wants to read a big, long abstract in this section. Next, in this featured, I just have one thing. This is the main part of my research, hydration research. So all I did was I uploaded one little slide deck from a talk I gave. And a person can look through this and kind of look at some of the talks that I've given about hydration. You can see that if there's slides with animation, they don't come out that great overall. But what it does is it gives a person to just see a quick little example of what you do for research. The other things that you can do in here is just put in your experience. Where have you worked? That'll give people a view of what has happened. The last part at the bottom is, right here, your skills and endorsements. People can endorse you for different skills. So I've had 10 people endorse me for fitness, 11 people for data analysis, What's my best one? Oh, public speaking. I have 21 people endorse me for public speaking. Not super important, but you might want to go into this real quick and select things, because what's going to happen is people can actually search for those different terms. And if, for example, they search for public speaking and teaching and exercise science, my name might come up if they look in LinkedIn. So using the headshot that you're going to create, I want you to create a LinkedIn profile. Very bare bones, doesn't have to be that crazy overall, but create that LinkedIn profile and just send me the link. I'm going to check it out, give you some feedback, probably just give you a thumbs up from a thumbs down. Oh yeah, that's right. By the way, all this week's assignments are just complete or incomplete. So 50 points for the whole thing. You'll just get 50 points if you do all the work. I'm not going to be, grading your CV. I'm just going to give you some feedback if, there's parts to improve. Okay, that's LinkedIn. Next, ResearchGate. ResearchGate came out, and you'll use the same headshot that you have for the other one. What this does is it gets a little bit more nerdy. This allows you to get into some of the networking that's available within the scientific community. The cool thing with this is it allows you to, so here's myself. We have a little bit of an about me. You can see I haven't put any of this information in. The main reason I use this is for, networking about publications in general. So the part of this that I really work on is the research section. In here, there's a listing of all my publications. Here's that water intake, body water regulation and health that I added to my PubMed bibliography. It was automatically uploaded to here. They have some sort of software that kind of scans PubMed and looks for your name and will ask you if you want to import it. And there it goes. And the cool thing with that is this journal, Nutrients, for example, that I published this in, is an open access journal. So if we go to this page right here and click on the DOI, it'll bring you right to that journal article. There it is. And you can download the PDF if you want. So a person searching for your stuff, maybe they're a graduate student who doesn't necessarily have access to PubMed, and they don't have the journal permissions that you might need. So this is a nice way to allow people to have access to your journal articles that are publicly accessible, that are free to access, even if they don't have PubMed. Okay, so this has a listing of all your publications. You go through there. You can also choose to follow people if you want. You can invite your co-authors, but the main thing that I want you to do is make sure you put your research in there. You can also add your experience. This is new. Same thing, put where you've gone to school overall. You can see I worked at the Naval Health Research Center, I went to the University of Connecticut, and worked at the University of Arkansas. The stats part, don't pay too much attention to this. I've seen people go down the rabbit hole with this, and there are different ways to get kind of like, internet points for doing what you do, because you ask a lot of questions and maybe, you go into a lot of the message boards on this site. My recommendation is to stay away from that. Just put it up as your publications, because what will end up happening is people will start sending you a lot of messages here. Hey, can I have this article? Hey, what do you think about this? All this kind of stuff. And you want to avoid that, because that's a time suck. You want to have some presence, but make sure that it doesn't take away from the real important stuff, the research, because I've seen that happen, and I know you guys have probably seen it with other, friends and family who've, had trouble with social media stuff. Okay, so that's ResearchGate. So you're going to do a LinkedIn page, you're going to do a ResearchGate page, and the last one you're going to do is Google Scholar. One caveat with all these, because this is personal information, I do not want to make anyone do this. If you are uncomfortable having any presence online, that is 100% understandable. Send me a quick little email and say, you know what, Dr. Johnson, I'd prefer not to do this because I really don't like having my information online. That's okay. I found it to be beneficial in my career. If you have a professional, kind of thing without your, this doesn't have my cell phone number on it. This doesn't have, my home address on it. But at the same time, it is more information than not having it. So if you're uncomfortable with that, this is an optional part of the assignment. But I do want you to take that headshot, because that's going to come in handy when you get asked to do talks. Okay, so we've done our LinkedIn. We've done our ResearchGate. Last one, Google Scholar. Quick one. I want you to create a Google Scholar account. And for a lot of you right now, especially if you're in the first year of your master's, you're probably not going to have publications that are going to be listed here. But once again, this is a nice thing to get started early. You don't want to have to go back after you have 10, 15, 20 publications and upload them all at the same time and take half of a day to do that. No. Get it started early. This way somebody can really easily find a list of your publications right here, and you can see how those citations have kind of lined up over the years. Okay? So those are the 3 ones that I want you to create there. So for the assignment, part number 1, and the most important part, is that CV. Let's do that. Part number 2, take your own headshot. Somewhere in your house, do not do a quick selfie. Don't do one of those car seat selfies where you see this person's seatbelt or something like that. None of them. The video that I posted is pretty good. It's quick, 6 minutes. It'll give you some do's and don'ts on how to take a headshot at home. Okay, so that's part number 2 is the headshot. Part number 3, make yourself a LinkedIn page. Part number 4, make yourself a ResearchGate page. Part number 5, make yourself a Google Scholar page. And like I said, those last 3 are going to be pretty darn quick, just inputting kind of where you've been to school and uploading a headshot and maybe a quick little blurb about where you are. Okay, so that's it for this week. Go ahead and watch that, how to take a selfie or how to take your headshot video. Like I said, there'll be 2 more videos posted tomorrow, 1 interview, and also 1 of me practicing take my own headshot at home myself with my hair not being cut in the past 2 months. We'll make the best of it. Okay, so thanks guys, and this assignment is due next Sunday. Have a great night.